Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Dewan Rakyat convened today for the first session of Parliament's 15th term. Just before 6:15 p.m. today, a motion of confidence for Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim was passed through MPs through a voice vote. Earlier today, Parliament had appointed Datuk Johari Abdul as the new speaker. So let's go through all the day's events. Joining me now to weigh in on the proceedings today, Dr. Tricia Yeo is the CEO of the think tank Ideas Malaysia. Tricia, thank you for joining me on the show tonight. What did you make of today's proceedings?
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me on. Well, it was interesting to note that there was quite a lot of debate during the motion on the vote of confidence in the afternoon. And I think, as expected, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, as 10th Prime Minister, managed to get the vote that he required to provide what we hope will now be some political stability. And, the government today will be able to continue pursuing its policy implementation. Of course, there will still be some hurdles next year to come, but as far as today is concerned, I think as far as the government agenda of the day was intended to be, it was successful on both counts. Number one, in appointing the new Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat, and of course, number two, in obtaining the vote of confidence. So no major surprises. Of course, there was a lot of debate over the MOU itself. I think that was the main point that the opposition was trying to make about it, especially Clause 4 being unconstitutional and undemocratic. But again, by and large, I would consider this to be a win for government today.
Okay, so just a couple of hours ago, Ideas released a statement that expressed strong concern over that auto-resign clause in the MOU that was signed. Can you elaborate why this is such a big concern? But also, the debate in Parliament, do you think that that covered the issues that Ideas is also concerned about?
I think the concerns raised by the opposition members of Parliament were similar. I think they probably took a step further to call it unconstitutional. We are not lawyers at Ideas. We're looking at the policy aspects of it. And the concern here really is that members of Parliament, we have always encouraged, right? So this is not a departure from any of the things that we've said before. Members of Parliament need to be able to vote and debate and consider issues based on their own conscience. And as we saw what happened in the Ismail Sabri administration, even before that under Tan Sri Muhyiddin, there was a lot of bipartisanship, and some of this bipartisanship was actually what achieved a lot of the policy reforms, right? The legal and constitutional reforms, such as Undi 18, even some of the anti-sexual harassment bills. All of these various legislations would not have been able to take place had there not been bipartisan, or actually, in fact, multi-partisan support from across the divide. So the concern is that if the MOU restricts individual members of Parliament from exercising their individual conscience and their individual right to vote according to their what they believe to be fair and right for a certain piece of legislation, rather than having to toe the party line all the time, this could actually set a dangerous precedent, and it could, actually be a slippery slope as well. We understand if it is for matters that really test the confidence of the government of the day, for example, the budget, for example, the vote of confidence as happened today, or even for the Agong speech. I think these are the three main things and events that usually typically test the confidence of a government. But for individual legislation, bills that are typically brought into Parliament, we believe that it's actually best and ideal for individual members of Parliament to be able to voice their support or even disagreements as they see fit.
Right. Ideas also talked a little bit about the importance of Perikatan Nasional's role as the opposition. You called for the forming of a shadow cabinet. We know that Perikatan had said earlier on they were planning to form a shadow cabinet. But Trisha, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there has been an official shadow cabinet in Malaysia before. I think PKR tried to do something similar, short of calling it a shadow cabinet. What makes you think that this time around there will be a proper shadow cabinet, and what would go into making it work?
So in the past, there were attempts of a shadow cabinet, but because it was, made up of different parties within a coalition, what they had was more akin to like shadow committees, where different individuals from different parties formed this committee of sorts to shadow each of the ministries. I don't think it was very effective, but they tried to announce something in the past. But as to really shadow, I mean, the whole term of a shadow cabinet is that they shadow, right, the administration, the workings of the ministry. And also because, as you say, we've never had an official one in which the government has, actually recognized the existence of a shadow cabinet. I think hopefully this time, if an individual is actually appointed as a shadow cabinet minister, then the opposition would then therefore be able to oversee that portfolio in a more robust manner. But apart from the shadow cabinet, which is where opposition members of parliament can play a role and not just have shouting matches in parliament, I think the other thing to encourage is to really ensure that the parliamentary select committees are in a thorough manner in which not just, opposition members should be included, but also government backbenchers. Because don't forget, the government backbenchers also have a role to play. Apart from, being in coalition with their colleagues who are in the cabinet, they too should be able to exercise some role in parliament. And this is where, having the return of the Parliamentary Services Act and providing resources to parliament so that they can function, each of these committees can function with a good, set of officers that accompany it, resources to provide them for certain expenses that are required, maybe bringing in independent parties to provide insights from the private sector and civil society and so on. So all these things actually are really important. And this is also where opposition can play a role.
Trisha, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Dr. Trisha, you're of the think tank Ideas Malaysia. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more. Stay tuned.
Abang kamu ada je yang tak kena. Hari tu,
Wish, laju.
Mari. Sebab tu, plan dia sekarang ni paling laju. Ada macam-macam. Hebat, RM10 pun dapat.
Lepas tu, opah ni, awak pun nak juga kan?
Nampak gaya dua-dua ni nak Digi Fiber. Adik pun berhajat nak talent family kan?
Ceritanya semua orang nak.
ini pelan yang terbaik untuk keluarga.
Old Town White Coffee dihasilkan daripada resepi tradisi yang diwarisi turun-temurun. Dengan 3 jenis biji kopi yang terpilih dan dipanggang dengan penuh teliti. Menjanjikan rasa kopi putih yang halus, kaya dan berkrim. Kini dengan perisa karamel masin, nikmati rasa yang sungguh enak. Cubalah ia hari ini.
Malaysia will not change. We are the one. We are the change. So we need to look at other places and see sama ada kita boleh orang kata apa bagi satu global perspektif kepada anak muda kita.
Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. The Dewan Rakyat convened today for the first time since GE15, during which a new speaker was elected and Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim passed a motion of confidence through a voice vote. Joining me on the show now is Lee Chen Chung. He is the MP for Petaling Jaya and PKR Communications Director. Chen Chung, thank you for joining me on the show today. The motion of confidence was passed through a voice vote. Without a block vote, the exact numbers supporting Anwar Ibrahim's majority in Parliament remain unknown. Do you expect there to be any lingering doubts over the legitimacy of this Prime Minister?
First of all, I don't think that's a problem because resorting to voting in votes, meaning that the bill is passed actually with less pressure and also with less constraints, meaning that there's less opposition from the other side. So that's why there is no belah bahagi, or we call it like block votes. So that actually means we will see more support than expected on the motion of confidence.
But yes, it was a smoother process, but do you worry that there could be this could be raised later on, particularly by Perikatan Nasional, to question the legitimacy? I know that the Chief Whip of PN, Takridi Hassan Kota Baharu, has already said they didn't intend to vote on what they called an invalid document. Could this be a ploy to drag on questions over legitimacy down the line?
It would be very irresponsible for them to do that. I mean, if they are trying so, because first of all, as I mentioned, the motion is tabled, and it requires more than 10 MPs to stand up and just register so that we will have a vote on block. But they did not do that. And at the same time, based on what has been voted since like in the morning on selection of the speakers and deputy speakers, so the recorded numbers are very encouraging. So we got like very close to 2/3 and even 2/3. So I think for that motion of confidence, if they are not even trying to call for a block vote, meaning that they have given up in opposing, and it's almost like unanimous decision to pass that vote of confidence. I mean, to our understanding as lawmakers.
Okay, so the proceedings today was also marked by very heated debate over the use of the phrase unity government. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Is this term that's been disputed by Beluran, is it just semantics? There's something deeper going on here, the fact that there seems to be such an objection to Bagan's use of the term unity government?
I think Perikatan Nasional has been a bit picky in selecting this narrow topic because the unity government, the term is coined by none other than Yakti Agung. He asked Muhyiddin and also Anwar when they first
been granted the audience on whether they supported the unity government. So it can be very academic if we want to really go into details where from their side, they will say that it's not a unity government because they are not included. But on our side, we would also argue that you are not included because you are not asked, you rejected to form this unity government with the rest of the bloc. So, and the argument would never end. So I think to me, Perikatan Nasional has picked a very narrow topics for them to gain or score political points.
Will this government then be addressing the concerns raised not just by Perikatan Nasional but also other members of civil society and legal groups over the concerns about the MOU that was signed between all parties under Anwar Ibrahim's government concerns that it imposes the auto resign clause. It imposes on an MP's right to vote.
Okay, I can truly understand the concerns by NGOs and also the parliamentary watch groups on the possibilities on like potential suppression of voices and freedom and all that. But I would also like to assure, the audience or the, larger audience that it's actually not something that should be worried about, because if we really finish reading the documents, the agreement is actually one between political parties. And the agreement can be actually made private, but PH and other parties have decided that we should make it public for public to scrutinize and to understand the spirit of this agreement. And the spirit of this agreement is none other than the extension of the anti-hooping spirit, the anti-hooping law, and the expectation of the public that the government should be run responsibly, and also to run long term. And it's not about like you sign an SD and then you can change your PM in the government the next day. So it's under this spirit that the parties that decided to work together, that we need an agreement. At least there is a common platform, trust building, and also consensus for different parties to work together. And I don't think voices are suppressed. Like today is a good example where many issues were exchanged, many words were exchanged too. What we need is actually more decorum in the debate so that we can have more meaningful discussion and outcome.
Right. Thank you, Chin for joining me on the show today. That was MP for Petaling Jaya and PKR Communications Director Lee Chen Chung. We're going to take another very quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more. Stay tuned.
Diperkaya dengan kebaikan susu, diperkaya dengan tenaga dari malt. Kebaikan berganda dari susu UHT dengan malt Marigold.
Alhamdulillah, masih diberikan rezeki darinya. Mungkin kebahagiaan ini dapat aku kongsikan pada mereka.
Duit zakat dah dapat. Alhamdulillah.
Adalah menjadi tanggungjawab kita untuk membantu meringankan beban mereka yang memerlukan.
As a bank, it's what drives us to do right by you.
Dalam membawa setiap berita, semestinya yang penting adalah untuk membawa pelbagai sudut sesuatu cerita itu.
Yang pastinya suara akar umum, terutamanya suara rakyat, harus diberi ruang. Kami di Astro AWANI sentiasa komited dan juga bertanggungjawab dalam menyampaikan berita yang seimbang, konstruktif, terutamanya kepada seluruh rakyat Malaysia.
Saya Jasmine Abu Bakar.
Dan saya Sani Ahir.
Pastikan AWANI 745 dan Sinar AWANI menjadi pilihan utama anda.
Sebagai sebuah organisasi perkhidmatan kewangan global, Sun Life Malaysia menawarkan pelindungan insurans dan takaful yang komprehensif untuk membantu anda mencapai jaminan kewangan dan menjalani kehidupan yang lebih sihat.
Hi, I'm Melissa Idris. Thank you so much for staying with me on Consider This. Let's continue our discussion about the first day of Parliament sitting under the government led by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim today. Let's speak now to political analyst Dr. Bridget Wells. She's an honorary research associate at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia's Asia Research Institute. Bridget, thanks for joining me on the show today. Amid all the shouting that happened in Dewan Rakyat today, what did you make of the day's proceedings?
Well, I think as the other speakers have pointed out, we had a vote of confidence, and I think that especially with the 2 votes beforehand for the speaker and the deputy speaker, it's pretty clear that Anwar has the numbers. They're large, although the voice vote was, I think, not ideal because it allows the opposition to kind of feed their narrative, which their narrative has been one of kind of trying to question the legitimacy of this government, which they have been doing since the election. I do think that the opposition proved itself to be prepared from the perspective of continuing that destabilizing role that we've seen they have carried out since the election, which includes, attacking the composition of the government, the legitimacy of the government. What was unfortunately, I think, another layer, a kind of disturbing layer, is that they were also engaging in personal attacks on individuals in the government. In the parliament. And I think that really doesn't sort of move Malaysia in a direction towards dealing with policies and dealing with the real challenges of the country in terms of the economy.
Can we talk a little bit about that, about the destabilizing role that Perikatan Nasional has seemingly adopted this approach as opposition? What are the red flags that you might be watching out for, Bridget? Because again, Perikatan Nasional has said they want to form a shadow cabinet. Is this going to be a shadow cabinet that is going to provide policy competition, going to provide a check and balance, or just play the role of disruptor, of destabilizer?
I felt today we saw the latter rather than the former, in the sense that there was a destabilizing element in this context. So let me unpack a few of the key elements that were kind of clear. Number one is that they really attacked the legitimacy of the government. So by going after the MOU and the constitution elements of Clause 4, as well as the issue associated with whether or not it was unified in terms of the kind of label of the government, implicitly, it's not just talking about the PN not being in the government. This is the idea that they have been harping on, that they represent the Malay community, is implicit in this. And then, of course, I think, unfortunately, the voice vote leaves space for kind of misinterpretation or misdirection of what that means, because it will there's already been a narrative suggesting that that by not getting the numbers. Now, this of course can be corrected by the mini budget vote, which I think would probably be advisable to make sure those numbers are pretty clear. But I think the fact is that they're taking every single opportunity to create doubts and to kind of harp on the sense that they feel that they belong to, that they should have the right to form the government. And this whole the whole conversations about SDs and so forth, are feeding this narrative that they were denied the government, when in fact, actually, they did not have the numbers in that context, and they did also choose to adopt a approach which was not one that was unified in any way in terms of wanting to collaborate with different coalitions across the spectrum.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that, without a block vote, so having this motion of confidence being passed through a voice vote, we don't actually still know Anwar's exact numbers in Parliament. How did you say that this is possible to correct? Do you think that Anwar will seek to correct this, to have the exact numbers of his majority clear, there's no doubt, clearly known, and putting to bed any kind of concerns over the legitimacy of his administration?
Look, the 2 votes earlier in the day clearly indicate that the numbers would have been significant and reached the 2/3 mark, or almost reached the 2/3 mark. I think, that clarity is necessary given the history of Anwar's issues on numbers, and also the fact that there is, there are perceptions that there are people in the government that may not want to go on record for voting in this particular way. So I think that clarity would have probably been more advantageous. But there, as I said, there are opportunities for that clarity in other votes, like the mini budget vote in that context. So I don't, but the thing is, it's not I mean, not that the vote of confidence was not accurate. It was an accurate vote in terms of a overall majority, but more the fact that the opposition is using any seeds of doubt, and those are their tactics.
All right. Very quickly, Bridget, we've got a couple of minutes left. Today also saw the appointment of the new speaker, Datuk Johari Abdul. What do you make of this appointment?
Well, I think he's a very capable, seasoned politician. I think that he's also an Anwar loyalist, and I think that this is also kind of feeding the perception that this is of less security on the part of the government, that you choose a loyalist as opposed to somebody who's seen as more independent in that regard. But I think he handled the House with I think very well, and I think he has a reputation of integrity in terms of his his role as a state assemblyman and also as a member of parliament. So I think that I think he will, however, have to make sure that he handles these issues from a perspective of a bipartisan approach and to move away from his Anwar loyalist label.
All right. Thank you so much, Bridget, for joining me on the show. Political analyst Dr. Bridget Welsh there, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.